Hello guys, my name is Anna and I'm a Ukrainian, and I have decided I will vlog daily from my country Ukraine since the start of this awful war with Russia. And in my daily videos I try to update you on the important real-life situations in my country Ukraine, and of course I'm always glad to answer your questions and to clarify some facts from our history, our culture, our background, or whatever interests you. And today I had a totally different plan for my vlog, but I have just read the tweet of Elon Musk that Crimea should be given back to Russia because it was Khrushchev's mistake. And as a Ukrainian, as now angry Ukrainian, I feel like I have to react and to explain you my points. Well, first of all, Crimea is a very tragic and illustrative moment in modern Ukrainian history, because I personally, as millions of Ukrainians, are convinced that if the world reacted more aggressively back in 2014 when Crimea was annexed and proclaimed a part of Russia, then we could have avoided this war. But many people did not want to provoke conflict between small Ukraine and big Russia, and they decided we have to close our eyes on that. Total annexation was completely illegal, with people appearing in green uniforms without any labels, any flags, and this was traditional dirty game that Russians practiced for almost 8 years, hybrid war, when many of you doubted, and I don't blame you because Russian propagandists are present everywhere. They spend billions of dollars on the image of Russia that was present on TV channels and elsewhere, and I know that many people believed who knows what is happening in Ukraine, and this hybrid war was very toxic and tragic at the same time for us. On the 24th of February, all the masks were taken off, and the world finally saw what Russia is. It's a dark, awful face. And in one sphere, to some extent, it became even easier for us because it's very difficult when you describe something awful, what is happening, for example, family violence or something, and people don't believe you. So this was very similar to 2014, 2022, when many Ukrainians spoke about problems Russia creates for us, tragedies Russia creates, various special military operations it launched during this period, because we had this war starting from 2014, starting from annexation of Crimea and failures to annex Donetsk and Luhansk regions. That's what they were doing, but they managed to create some fake myths like this is a civil war or the referendum in Crimea was legal and other things. And many people did not want to go deep into the subject, or others chose to believe because Russia's voice was always stronger than Ukrainian voice before the start of this full-scale war. It changed everything, because when you commit so many crimes daily, when you break all the international laws, of course it's very difficult to continue manipulating opinion. So their hope was they won't need to continue this war so long, and maybe in 2-3 days they will take over Ukraine, and then maybe the world would have closed its eyes again. But Ukrainians were brave enough to oppose, and I remember how important these first days were. And also democratic, freedom-loving countries united and started helping us. And that was, for me, February and the beginning of March were the most decisive moments, when everybody realized that this is Russia's war in Ukraine, and Russia does complete nonsense, terror, and all the evil one can imagine. So, but Crimea was the starting point of this war, and weak reaction of global leaders was one of the blessings that Putin believed allowed him to continue slow annexation of other regions and the start of this full-scale war. So to some extent, I think Putin also thinks he's a little bit deceived by so many sanctions and so many reactions. He believed people will turn the blind eye on his crimes, but no, it won't be that way, and we will win this war and we will punish all the Russian military criminals. But Elon Musk saying that Crimea is Russia makes it very painful for Ukrainians. He was a very important figure at the beginning of this war, and all of us are grateful for Starlink that he provided. It seems to me that after the US, Ukraine was the first country to receive Starlink, and it saved many lives. And this technology is very important when you lose connection to mobile phones, when you don't have traditional internet connection. And Ukrainian armed forces got it from Musk, and that is huge. But at the same time, you cannot like set a questionnaire on Twitter whether Crimea is Russian and Ukrainian, and I would like to speak about the points that he mentions. This is like he's not an expert in Ukrainian, Russian, Soviet, and other histories, and that's why he makes serious mistakes when he says that Crimea was Khrushchev's mistake. Well, first of all, if we want to be like honest, and for me, the most just description of Crimea would be that it belongs to Crimean Tatars. It was like that for centuries, and Ukrainians and Crimean Tatars, they live peacefully together. They are indigenous people of the peninsula and of Ukraine, and we live and get on totally well, as in other diverse and interesting and normal European countries. It is Russians who either want to deport Tatars or to kill Ukrainians. They create all of these problems and all that blood in the center of Europe. So if you would have asked me a question, I would say that Crimea belongs to Ukraine, but also to the Crimean Tatars, and we can live peacefully together. And I'm sure that Crimean Tatars will support my words like 100%. But then, if we start counting the losses of territories and gaining of territories starting from the beginning of this century due to Soviet occupation and Soviet cutting and changing of boundaries, and they liked it because they tried to I don't know, like, how do you say, to fix various national ethnic conflicts within the borders that they gave to republics, Soviet republics. They did not create them according to their natural borders, but they liked to reshape it to embody various conflicts for future. And Ukraine lost lots of its lands. And for example, Rostov, which is now a Russian city, was once very Ukrainian. Voronezh was very Ukrainian. And we can start claiming that these are our territories, but we don't, because we respect international law and we understand that almost every country in Europe can relook its borders. And what will we get? Third World War? So Crimea, if we look at the history of Crimea, it is a beautiful, very beautiful from the natural and from the historical point of view place that has everything: mountains, sea, steppes, and at the same time it has Russian military bases. And that was our huge mistake, and that was our huge problem, and it continues like that. But many centuries, thousands of years ago, this land belonged to Scythians. This is a very interesting tribe and culture, and if you wish, I can speak about them in one of my vlogs dedicated to culture and history. Later, there were lots of Greek city colonies in there. And Greek culture is present in archaeological research and so on. And lots of cities are known and mentioned in Greek or ancient Greek works. Also, there were a period when Goths and Germans were there. And later, for a very long period of time, it belonged to Tatars, to the Golden Horde, if I'm not mistaken, in the name of this country, this state. And for centuries, Crimean Tatars lived there. They cooperated with Ukrainian Cossacks. There were lots of important trading centers in Crimea, including huge bazaars of slaves. And for example, Roxolana, who is a famous Ukrainian woman that was the favorite wife of one of the greatest Turkish sultans, Suleiman the Great, she was sold in Crimea. And during Zaporizhzhia siege, when Cossacks were active, they cooperated often and they had lots of bases in Crimea. And it is only after Russian-Turkish war that we start speaking about Russian occupation of Crimea. And when it returned to Ukraine in 1948, it was a totally normal procedure. Plus, it was always later autonomous. And at the same time, this is a very tragic period. I'm sorry, 1954. It was a very tragic period because lots of Crimean Tatars were deported from Crimea and they were unable to return back until the fall of Soviet Union. And then when they returned to Crimea, it was very difficult for them to gain back their property. It was almost impossible because like everything was lost, rewritten, and Soviet Union managed to create huge tragedies in the lives of people. And then after the fall of Soviet Union, Russians were doing many things to make Crimea back Russian. And one of the problems that actually, like, I don't know, led to future conflicts and war as a result was the fact that Sevastopol was given as a base for Russian military navy. And that was a huge mistake. And of course, it was not just a mistake, it was a special operation because Ukrainian pro-Russian presidents like Yanukovych signed laws that allowed Russian fleet, Russian navy to stay there. And that's why thousands of Russian military men were living in Crimea, changing its cultural identity, changing its face. And slowly they turned a beautiful place, a resort, into a military base with rusty waters and drunk Russian tourists who are also military men. And I have been to Crimea, I have been to Sevastopol long ago in 2001. And you could see people wearing Russian uniform, military uniform everywhere. So to annex Crimea was pretty easy because at the moment of the start of this special operation, they had hundreds and thousands of Russian military already on the territory of Crimea. And it was a Ukrainian mistake, or once again, pro-Russian figure, President Yanukovych was the one to accept that. And today, when so many Ukrainians left Crimea because of the persecutions there, when so many Crimean Tatars who had the tragedy of deportation had to once again be evacuated, leave their lands, leave their houses because it is impossible for them to continue working, to preserve their cultural heritage, to speak their language. Russia tries to eradicate all that. And after 2014, they have brought once again thousands of Russian people to live in Crimea, changing its cultural face. So for us, it is one of the most important things to return Crimea back to Ukraine, to return Crimea back to Crimean Tatars, to bring investments, I don't know, from Turkey or elsewhere, and to turn it back from rusty Russian military base into a beautiful resort that attracted so many interesting people, poets, writers, artists back in previous centuries. And it is a huge mistake to think that the referendum in Crimea demonstrated people's will. It was one of those fake referendums that we see now, with soldiers standing close to voting boxes and results prepared beforehand. And if we start believing such referenda, then the whole world is in danger, because almost in every country Russia can fake something similar and proclaim independence of any of your regions if we start believing that. So for Ukrainians, it is vital to return Crimea back. and my lights are out. So it's time perhaps to finish the vlog. I hope you understand it's very, very important for us Ukrainians. So thank you once again for watching. Thank you for support that you give me by buying coffees, becoming my patrons. And please share this video if you understand that Crimea is Ukraine, and subscribe to my channel. Slava Ukraini!